Hey everybody, I'm Benjamin Rolnick and I'm here with the one and only Dr. Thomas Griggs, who's an absolute brilliant leadership development teacher, and he's taught me so much about conflict resolution. You taught me about ego structures and all types of things today in particular. And I've got a really important question for you. How do you invite people into the conversation of cultural differences?
Yeah, sure. Well, that's a good one. We were talking about this past weekend at a board retreat, and folks are often wanting to know how to deal with what they call resistors. They want to know, well, what about the people that aren't here? What about all the people that are not in the room that ought to be in the room? And what do you say to somebody when they say, you're creating the problem? This problem doesn't exist except you keep naming differences, and that's, if you don't call attention, it wouldn't be a problem. So that's a generic one out there.
And
So,
when you say that, what you mean is we don't need to talk about racism or sexism or anything, because if we don't talk about it, then it's not real.
yeah. Racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, all that. So one of the things, the concepts that we introduce is the concept of modern racism, and we'll take race as an example. And the question is, has oppression existed historically on race, on color? And most people will say yes, but not everybody will. So for those that are kind of wavering about it, it's, yeah, okay, it has existed historically. Who can give me the date that racism ended in the United States? When was that? And if I don't have that date, if you don't have that date, then the obvious question is, what became of it? And if I grew up in this culture, which a lot of us did, then I inherited that culture. And if I don't have the date that racism is completely erased from my personal biography, then the obvious question is, what became of it in me? So how does it live in the culture? How does it live in me? And that then is the modern era question. What am I still doing, the leftovers that I inherited that I didn't intend, they weren't my idea, and I don't notice them because I'm not thinking in that direction. And white people often have what we call discontinuous history. White people think, well, that was then, this is now. My father didn't own slaves. Why are you talking to me? Well, the kind of the way around that is that understand that people of color, black people in particular, have continuous history. It's when a shooting happens in Ferguson, they go, here we go again, same old thing. It's in the context of the flow of history. We, white people, on the other hand, very frequently have discontinuous history of, wait, you should analyze this event on its own merits. Don't string it together with all that other stuff. Well, for the black people, it's like, what do you mean don't string it together? I hear this every day. I've heard it all my life. Just because you haven't heard it doesn't mean it's not there. So the modernism exercise is, what have we inherited? And there's no blame, no shame for inheriting it. And then how do I systematically go after discovering the leftovers? That's those behaviors we talked about last night about dysfunctional rescue and avoiding contact and blaming the target and those. So that's one way to answer that question.
Wow. So just to kind of dovetail that a bit, is there something that people can do about classism, sexism, racism, their participation in it, their it being done to them, etc.?
The best thing to do is to get into a learning environment, a learning group, and do it with other people. Because I don't know what I don't know. And it really helps. If the group is diverse, fine. All groups are diverse. They're just not necessarily diverse on the obvious variables. But we're diverse on religion, ability, age, sexual orientation, region of the country, a lot of other things besides color. And of course, gender is always available as something to explore. If we believe or agree that we're in the modern era and there's a lot of history that's left over, then our learning group, so every time we meet, we simply go, what have I learned this week? What have I discovered about how I dysfunctionally rescue women, or how I avoid contact with people who are transgender, or whatever it is? How do I treat people as if we're all the same when recognizing that we're different would be in fact, respectful and helpful. We just check in and we report what we're learning each week and we talk about it.
Wow.
That's the simplest way to go about it.
I have so many more questions about this, and I also want to I want to end this video, but I want to end it in a way where you can actually tell people what you told me about how you moved from being a clinical psychologist to being somebody that works with culture, because I thought that transition was really fascinating. So are you open to telling people a bit about that?
Well, at the list of risk of running too long, yeah, I'm happy to do it. I was a clinical psychologist, and I did individual, group, and family work for a number of years. And I was good at it and successful, and I also started to get bored and hungry and restless about making a bigger difference. I wanted to, if this worked for a small group, it ought to work for a large group. Mm-hmm. And if it worked for one person, it could work for 50. So I moved into employee assistance programming and set up programs for IBM, GlaxoSmithKline, and a bunch of others, and looked after the populations of employees and family members there, and carried over everything I knew from working in the clinical field as a psychologist, and administered those programs to offer assessment and short-term counseling and referral to the people we were caring for. And IBM said, quite wisely back in the early 80s, you can't work with our people unless you are serious about understanding cultural differences. So they required us to take training, advanced training, right at the same time that some dear friends of mine started up a consulting firm, Visions Inc., visions-inc.org. And they asked me to join them. So in '91, I started up what is still my profession, at least half-time, doing explicit consulting and training about cultural differences and building equitable community. So, for example, I'll spend 3, 4, 5 years at a university helping them build everything it takes to create an inclusive, equitable climate on their campus. So does that answer the question you were asking about the transition?
It does. It does.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so much more I want to talk about in terms of like personal transformation versus interpersonal transformation versus group versus cultural level transformation. And how can people find out more about what you do and learn from you?
Well, that's finally easy to do. Just go to griggsleadership.com, Griggs, griggsleadership.com, and you can select whatever jumps up that you're interested in, including the course in Epic Leadership, which is a 16-week online self-paced course that includes 350 pages of written material and 20, 30 hours of recorded material, plus live application calls every week with me, so people ask for consultation on various issues. And that is up and running now, and people are welcome to sign in and learn more.
I'll put a link to that on my post. What a pleasure. I'm so happy that we had this moment, because if you have an opportunity to learn with Thomas, and I don't know when the next time you're in LA, but I'll host something, I'll post something out. He is an absolute genius. We literally spent the last 4 hours this morning, and I was combing through your brain, just picking apart all of these things that you've learned that I didn't even know in the room in these last few seminars with you. I had no idea you had that level of training beyond the training that you have in cultural change, cultural difference, and group consultations and all of that. I mean, absolutely profound thinker. I'm drinking from the well of your knowledge. I'm going to go back to that right now. So lucky me. Love everybody. Bye.